Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to Sufi Pilgrim's Progress. This is actually the second video that we're going to be producing for YouTube. And this is all done in the spirit of recent inspirations that we should enlarge our audience. And so we're going to address questions not purely from the mystical point of view, but also from a general point of view that everyone can relate to. This all started with a recent istikhara prayer, which we will talk about the istikhara prayer shortly, which indicated to me that we have to enlarge our horizons and try to address this message to everyone, not just those on the mystical path. Okay, so today's session is about living from the heart, which also implies not living from the brain alone. Now, we were all trained in our schooling system, at least in the Western world, probably also in the Eastern world, to continuously use our reason and our logic in order to solve problems and direct our lives. I call this the Aristotelian lie, because it's based on the fact that you can figure everything out from logic and from reason. Now, if you watch the way most of our institutions function, and many individuals, they try to accumulate as much data, as much information as they can, and then they make logical extensions and analysis of that data. I am submitting here that this is actually the wrong way to proceed, and the intellect can be a helpful consultant, but a very bad boss, and that we have to readjust our approach in life to more of the heart wisdom, the ancient wisdom, rather than this pedantic approach through reason, data collection, and logic. Now, the French, we are living here in Quebec in the middle of a French culture, have a saying which they often quote. And this saying says, "Le cœur a ses raisons que la raison ne connaît point," which translated somewhat liberally says, the heart has its reasons that reason can't fathom. Unfortunately, this is often used as a pretext for impulsive and foolish behavior, saying this is what the heart led me to do. So I've added to this statement, but the heart also has a kind of insanity that wisdom and discernment have to manage. So we have to be careful. How do we get into this confusion? I think one of the places we get into the confusion is that there's actually two chambers in the heart. Now, we all know that the physical heart has 4 chambers, but let's say the spiritual heart has 2 chambers. The first that we all know of is what I would call the gross chamber, where we're talking about very strong, intense emotions, whether they be anger, joy, sadness, or love, and that part of the heart can get us into trouble. In fact, it's probably the part of the heart that gets us regularly into trouble. But there's another chamber in the heart, if you wish, the ventricle, the more important chamber, which is the subtle heart. And this subtle heart is what we're really referring to when we say le cœur a ses raisons, that heart wisdom or open-hearted awareness. There many terms can be used for that. And it refers to a kind of intuition, a subtle feeling, even an inner voice that is the subtle heart, that is what we should be counting on more than the reason. More than reason itself. Now, how can we develop this heart is a very important, crucial question, and there are a number of ways. Any of the spiritual methodologies, whether they involve prayer, meditation, dhikr, mindfulness, silence, retreat, all of them are designed actually to develop the heart rather than the reason, and to free us from the prison of our minds. We do have to be aware, however, that all of this training can have side effects. And one of the major side effects is it develops sensitivity. And this sensitivity can be very helpful, but it can make things difficult if we're in an environment where sensitivity is not the rule of the day. For example, in my own personal experience, as I began doing these practices, I found it increasingly hard to work in psychiatric emergency rooms where the feelings of anger and agitation and fear and terror were so strong that they affected my heart, and it was hard for me to do the necessary work. So there are side effects to this process. The other way of training the heart is what the Sufis have called from the beginning the jihad an-nafs. And this is not this terrible jihad that we hear about nowadays with the jihadists, but this is a work on ourselves in which we're, instead of fighting some imaginary enemy, we're actually fighting our own evil tendencies, whether they be towards greed or materialism or lust or any of the 7 deadly sins, that we struggle against them. That too will increase our sensitivity and develop our heart sensitivity, as opposed to our gross emotional sensitivity. Now, one of the things I wanted to emphasize here, because I think it's extremely useful, is also related to knowing the knowledge of the heart. And this is a practice that is used in the Islamic world, has been used almost since the beginning, which is called the istikhara practice. Now, I'm aware that most people don't know the Arabic involved, but really istikhara practice is about making the right choices in our life. And this is one of the difficulties we confront on a regular basis. Now, this istikhara practice begins with a dua, a prayer of humility, which says essentially, O God, or whoever else you believe in, I am ignorant, you are all-knowing. I am weak as a human being, you are all-powerful. So you are going to show me what to do, because I can't figure it out on my own. And we do this before we go to sleep, and we go to sleep after this prayer, and then we look for one of the 4 following areas in which the response can come. The first is in dream symbolism. Now, dreams are not always obvious, they're not always easy to interpret, and there's a certain amount of skill, there's a certain science and art to dream interpretation that may well be the subject of other talks down the line. So first we look for dream symbols. The second thing we can find is feelings in the heart. For example, if we say, should I go to a certain place and for visiting, and we wake up in the morning in an anxiety state, that's a negative sign. If we wake up, on the other hand, in a joyous, peaceful state, that may well be a positive sign. So those are the feelings in the subtle heart. Then there may be facts that develop on the ground after we do this prayer. One of the examples I give is, at one point I was intending to go visit India, and I called up the travel agents the next morning. This was before the internet, and no one can find me a ticket going to India at that point. Now, I could have persisted like most people do, but I learned over time to pay attention to these facts on the ground, because actually they are signs from the divine of whether we should do something or not. The fourth type of response is something I just discovered in the last couple of years, which is something that comes from third parties, from other people. Sometimes people will say something to you after you've done this prayer, especially if it's out of character for that particular person. Pay careful attention, because that may be the divine speaking to you through that person. And I have had numerous occasions where that third party had a dream that was directed to me, that I wasn't getting the dream with the answer, but someone that was close to me was, and that turned out to be the right answer. So this is a beginning. I want to go back to the original point, which is that the heart has its own wisdom. We have to learn how to read that wisdom, how to be in touch with it, how to be sensitive to it. And if we do, we'll find that our life works a lot better. Thank you very much. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, salamun ala mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-Fatiha. So we begin every session in the name of Allah, in the name of God, and we end every session remembering Him because He is the source of our inspiration. Ameen, Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen.